if you find yourself in an organization where you feel like people are looking at you like you have three heads, or that you speak in a different manner, or you think in a different way, it's probably because you've been placed there to provide the type of thinking diversity and experience that does not push against, but that it amazingly complements and strengthens the culture of that business.
And for those that are in positions of particularly executive leadership, to foster that diversity.
Yes.
Don't force everybody to think the same, to get in line, and we're not here. Invite that diversity of thought into your conversations.
Yeah. I mean,
it's healthy. One of the reasons that our first conversation went 3 hours is because we talked about the concerts that you went to in college. You're like, did you know that?
That'd be a separate podcast. I think you'd all find it very entertaining, but that's another day.
But when I think of this punk kid that grew up in Pekin, Illinois, and we won't talk about the fact that they weren't the Dragons then.
No, we won't go there anymore. They were committed to the Chinese culture and the brand. That's all I'm going to say.
That's right. And then went to Illinois State University and rocked out to AC/DC and all these others.
Oh, so fun.
And then married some California girl and decided to take a journey over to Colorado. And now you're a California boy and you're out surfing and all this stuff. But then get into ConAgra, like that's like a mega brand.
Yeah.
It's huge. I mean, you said what? 60? Fortune 60?
Has been,
Incredibly huge.
Yeah.
And then pop over just to a little church called Saddleback and do some work there. And then
fighting it every step of the way. I mean, I was gritting my teeth going in there. I did not want to go in the door.
And then all of that, and I don't want to pretend that I follow anything close to a similar track, but when I was introduced to Convene, I was like, God, did you just orchestrate all of that so that I could do this?
It's wild.
Hello again, and welcome to the H3 Leader Podcast, where our intent is to provide a consistent drip of foundational and practical insight, motivation, and calls to action that will help us all grow in the critical arena of leader development. John Maxwell makes the bold statement that everything rises and falls on leadership. If that's true, and from a particular perspective I believe it is, we probably ought to spend consistent time and energy on the subject. Today we step into episode 5, the very first of our episodes to include a guest appearance. Very quickly, I want to note that my hope is to highlight the beauty and the value of leaders within my relational sphere that can speak into the development of the H3 leader. In other words, my goal is not to wow the viewer with recognizable A-list names. In fact, most of my guests will be absolutely foreign to most of my tribe. But you know what? That is not only okay. It is, in my humble opinion, a value add to the conversation. Because let's face it, always upping the ante with A-lister recognizable names is not sustainable. What is sustainable is the vision of bringing the stories of real-life, trench-digging leaders to the table for eye-to-eye conversations that meet leaders like you and me right where we are. For our very first conversation, I am elated to introduce you to my good friend, Brett Schrock, coming up right after this. Brett, I really appreciate you taking a moment to be with me tonight. I know it's been a long day. You and I have been in an entire day of learning and development with the rest of our Convene cohorts here in Chicagoland. But appreciate you just being willing to come on, because you're my first guest star, if you will, on the H3 Leader Podcast. And I'm really looking forward to bringing insights and just hearing the passion from people that I admire, people that God has brought into my circle along the way, and looking forward to our conversation tonight. So thanks very much. Yeah. Could you start us off just by giving us a quick intro of who you are, a little bit of family, a little bit of vocation, and then we'll get into the meat of it all.
Yeah, absolutely. And Ken, thank you for inviting me. And Tribe, it's good to be acquainted with your crew.
Yeah.
I grew up here in the Midwest, as you know, close by where you're from.
Yeah.
Relatively small family, a brother and sister. And I was married 37 years ago, and I still am, to my
Wow.
wonderful wife, Cindy. I have a stepdaughter, Liz, who has two children, Luke and Taylor, and then had the privilege of marrying them, and then the son, Bailey, 33.
Oh, wow.
So that's a little bit about the family.
Yeah. Yeah.
In terms of the bio, kind of an interesting journey, and then it's been both for-profit organizations and nonprofit. And so out of the gate, my parents were farmers. I graduated when there was an economic slowdown in the early 80s, and I figured I'd need to do food, clothing, or shelter. So I went with food since I had an agricultural background. I went to work for ConAgra, a Fortune 60,
Okay.
that acquired many, many brands over the years. So it was a great experience. Had my own ad agency, which was an awful lot of fun. And it was in the era when websites were just being built. So I had one man in a room with his German Shepherd at his feet, eating Doritos and building a website.
Yeah. Early IT.
Early IT.
Now, was that in Illinois or California?
That was California.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So you'd already made the trek.
I'd made the trek. When I married Cindy, we started off in Colorado, and she was from California. And it was tough for her. You know, her family was in California. Mine was in Illinois. Hers was in California, but it was hard to take the California out of the girl.
Yeah.
I could take her out of the California, but it just worked out better for us to be back in California.
Good.
So I've been a Californian now for 35 years.
Wow.
Yeah, different than Central Illinois.
Yeah.
But they both are fantastic. Yeah, that's exactly right. After ConAgra, I continued to search where I should go on my journey. And ultimately, I owned my own advertising agency. And we did a lot of fulfillment, warehousing, customer service, care, strategic plan development, and just a lot of things, photography for ads, back when hard copy was the driver.
Yeah.
So I've got, telephones had cords on them.
You had to develop the film.
Yeah. I wasn't in the black room, but I mean, it did have to be developed. Food photography, we squirt with a little bottle to make the fruit and vegetables look fresh. All kinds of minor details like that, but it made the business a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So along that journey, I actually went to church for a long time. That had been a long time. And I really felt moved to go to seminary. And I can remember calling my buddies that I was in the corporate world with and some of the other friends I had along the way. And, we played catch up, and they just said, "So what are you doing now?" And I said, "Well, I'm actually going to go to seminary." And it was like very quiet on the end of the phone. It was almost like somebody dropped the phone on the other side.
Yeah,
if you knew my history,
out of left field.
If you knew my history, and then so I went to.
I know a little of your history.
Yeah, you do. Not to be dangerous. And so I went to seminary, got my degree, and then I went to work at Saddleback Church in Southern California, and did a variety of things there. But I was really engaged in the recovery ministry.
Mm-hmm.
I did work then with the NIV Bible, which is the world's #1 nonfiction book in history. The Bible is, and the NIV is the #1 distributed and read translation among all the Bible translations. So, people ask me how I got there, thinking I was some theological giant or something. It was more just about, I think, being on the checkerboard, because I was just kind of moving my pieces.
Yeah.
I kind of said, I don't know. It wasn't real impressive, but it's kind of how the way I rolled. And then from there, I did work at Purpose Driven within Saddleback.
Another kind of popular book.
Yeah, there was another book called The Purpose Driven Life, and there were 50 million copies sold, and it was on the New York Times bestseller list, my goodness, for many, many months. I'm going to say over a year for sure.
Yeah.
And all kinds of audiences were really drawn to it.
And you didn't just write ad copy for these two organizations. You had a significant role in both of those, correct?
Right. I didn't write the Bible. I mean, to your point, I didn't write the Bible, but my role with the Bible was I had translators around the world, and I negotiated all the publishing contracts with publishers around the world, both print and non-print. And then I was able to travel a long way for a lot of great things and had friends all over the world. So
Awesome.
it was wonderful. It was fantastic.
That's amazing.
It was how small is our global community was really
Mhm.
what it boiled down to. And so that was my responsibility as COO. I really applied all my corporate background and history in that application.
Right.
Hard calls, personnel calls, budgetary calls, just like you do in a regular business.
Mm-hmm.
Tough calls, some easy calls, and migrating non-profit or for-profit best practices in a nonprofit sometimes painful because people have different kinds of experiences.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in the purpose-driven, my role was to oversee really being a liaison between Rick Warren's office, the author, and all denominations that would see me.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, I knew enough to be dangerous, as they say, but not too much to get into too deep of a conversation. I really went for the central message of what on earth am I here for?
Yeah.
But my role was customer care, and we would add the book grew so fast that I'd had like 3 people in customer service, and then within 2 weeks I'd have 10, and before it was over I had like 25 people sitting at cubicles. It wasn't remote at that time, and it wasn't Zoom.
Yeah.
And you'd die laughing at this. We had VCH tapes that we used, and would put in boxes with hard copy. Small group curriculum and a notebook on how to do the campaign, and I'd have people assembling on 8-foot tables to put in the book, the small group stuff, the VHS tape, and away it went.
Yeah.
And I worked with Zondervan, the publisher, and I would call them and say, first couple months it was I need 2 truckloads, then it was I need 5 truckloads, and then I'd call them and say I need 10 truckloads. And it'd just be dead air on that side of the phone. And then
we need to get some more paper.
Yeah. Then they come back and say, well, we can print it that fast, but the ink doesn't dry that fast. so it was a good kind of problem to have, but we did a lot of troubleshooting. So it was supply chain management in today's terms. It was customer care, and it was really a strategic alliance person. And then I also got to teach internationally on the topic.
That's
so
amazing.
Numerous translated finished copies, 50 million copies that were sold, and it's still growing today.
Right.
And oh my gosh, thousands and thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of churches.
Yeah.
All across different denominations. And as the book expanded and the mainstream audience began to adopt it, because they wanted to know what their purpose was too.
Yeah.
Obviously, that a lot of different religions were taking a hard look at this book, because there's a hole in their heart that was like, hey, what am I really here for? And they wanted to go deeper.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how that went.
I love that you've had exposure to both of those relatively significant publishing and distribution and really, we'll call them iconic brands, if you will, the NIV and the Purpose Driven, and we're going to come back to that in just a moment. But before we do that, I just want to tell a quick story that I will never forget the first time we met.
Okay.
So it was a phone call, and I was just coming into the Convene ecosystem. I was I was rookie. I didn't even know what I was getting into. I had no concept of what peer-to-peer advisory teams were about, that this organization existed, whatever. And I pick up the phone and I'm calling some guy in Yorba Linda, California, that I got a phone number, and we set up, this call was set up for me, and that's unusual for me. And I'm just starting to get to know this guy, which was you. And one of your first questions was, where'd you go to school? And I said, Illinois State. And you're like, I went to Illinois State too. Yeah. And then you started talking about how the fact you grew up in Central Illinois, and then you said I was in Pekin, and I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
I'm sitting in Pekin, Illinois right now.
Crazy.
And just the synergy that came to us almost immediately. That was an over a 3-hour phone call, Brett.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Amazing.
And
wow.
Talk to my wife. I don't do 10-minute phone calls.
Yeah.
Normally. So it was just the synergy, the camaraderie, the really the beauty of the launch of our relationship, and just from a call, practically a cold call.
Yeah.
So I really appreciate that, and the way that you've welcomed me into what now has become my what I hope to be a legacy career. So thank you
I'm sure
for
it
that.
will be.
Thank you
Yeah.
for that.
Yeah.
So the crux of why I'm inviting my leader friends into this conversation is to dive into what I'm calling the three core characteristics of a heart-driven leader. Someone who understands that it's more than just knowing the techniques. It's more than just having the right words. It's more than just being in the right circles and having the right relationships and the right answers. But that there's something much deeper in our purpose, going back to being purpose-driven, in our purpose as leaders. And we recently were a part of a conversation where we talked about the purpose of businesses to facilitate human flourishing. And then I had to go out and do a quick video because I honestly believe we could extrapolate that into the role of a leader, that the purpose of a leader is to facilitate human flourishing in others. Because there's just a unique gifting there, but it has to go deeper than just that surface level knowledge that I read out of a book one day.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so those three core characteristics are that the H3 leader is humble, the H3 leader is healthy across the spectrum of our existence, not just physical health, but mental health, emotional health, relational health, spiritual health. And in the physical health space, it's not just that I'm a healthy person, but that I'm developing my skills and abilities in the tactile world. And I know, it's one thing to think about the words. It's one thing to be compassionate in your wording. It's one thing to have a heart motivation for the word, but then you have to say the words well. And that's what I mean by the different capacities of health in the role of a leader. And then the third characteristic is this idea of being holistic. And that is, like, let's say you're really good at making widgets and you're just the best at making widgets. Somebody could say you're a leader because you're the best at making widgets. But in the perspective that I'm taking into this leader development conversation is that it's got to be more than that. You can't just be a one-trick pony.
Right.
That a leader, a heart-driven leader, a heart-level leader, the H3 leader, appreciates the fact that they've been given a skill set and a gifting of leadership. And once they've mastered at some level over here, okay, God, where else do you want to use me? Where else am I needed? Where else is this gift needed to help facilitate that human flourishing that we're talking about? So humble, healthy, and holistic. Those are the three H's in the H3 leader. And we're going to tie this all the way back to the fact that you have played a significant role in two of the most prolific titles in modern day, the NIV Bible and the Purpose-Driven Life. How does that flow into this concept of being humble as a leader? Either challenges that you've had with it or how you've seen that process in your own heart?
Yeah, thank you, Ken. It's kind of interesting we're talking about the purpose-driven life and humble out of the gate. Because for those of you who have read the book, the first 5 words of the book are, "It's not about you." How's that for a kickoff of a book? Or a kick
Please, let me read more.
Yeah, or a kick in the head. I mean, it was a kick out. But I kind of had a grin when I read it. And there's also a little bit of trepidation about what I'd find as I turned the pages. Because from my perspective at that time, it was kind of all about me in my own selfish perspective.
Yeah.
I'd like to just take a second to unpack humble. The word humble. I think a lot of people, when they hear the word humble, sometimes we'll get the definition correct, but I think sometimes people feel that if they go humble, they're going one down. It's kind of like the word meek. People think meek is weak, and maybe humble is,
a little less than.
Yeah, a little less than top tier.
Yeah.
And, no further understanding can be far from the truth. The power position in humility is to say some things that are really strong about who you are, who you really are, who you believe you are, and then who you really are. And those words come about because of your vulnerability and transparency, and I think most importantly, not having to have credit. I think in the early years of our careers, we want to get the stripes and the credit, and we believe that that automatically transfers to a raise or a promotion.
That credit is actually like a stair step.
It is. It is. It's earning credits or stripes, and there's nothing wrong about, as I guess my dad would have said, tooting your horn. But there's a way to do it. It's not at the point of dissing other people's contributions or going over the top of what someone else has done and taking the credit for yourself. That would be the antithesis of being humble. But I think as we all get more confident in who we are and whose we are, from my perspective, the more we don't need the credit. The results will speak for themselves. And I think our satisfaction, we've done the best job we can do, helps us in that humility of walking it out. As a person who's been in the recovery journey, there's a step called the fourth step, which is about taking an inventory. And I think in terms of examining the humble, I think if we can pause, if I can pause, more importantly, to take my inventory on an on-running basis through the day, what could I have done better? What did I say that maybe I could have said differently? Did I take that person's perspective into account as I communicated with them? And that applies to sales, that applies to management, it applies to wherever you are on the team. It's about thoughtfulness. And thoughtfulness, again, is not a weak term. If you're thoughtful and kind, sometimes those are considered soft words. But they're actually not. They're very potent words, because we have to examine life through the lives of other people. And if we don't have humility, it's very difficult to see that, because we're pile driving. So in terms of me personally, earlier in my career, I was kind of pile driving. I was looking at people as kind of a means to my end, to my victory. And I think in humility now, it's the reverse, where when they succeed or when I stand behind and see them succeed, it's the higher payoff.
So one of the practical methodologies that I'm pulling out of what you're talking about there is that reflection and self-awareness are actually key components to that humility.
Yeah.
And it's not about a comparison to others. It's just really a comparison to our own ideal.
Right.
And we're always going to fall short of that.
Yes,
and,
always.
And there's that tension of accepting that while also trying to better that along the way.
Right.
And that process is a process of keeping us in check, if you will.
Yeah. And here's the thing is that I think if we're all honest, we're all insecure.
Mm-hmm.
I had a friend who is a teacher and an author who said, we're all desperately insecure. He ratcheted up another notch.
Yeah.
And we've all got these, different hurts and habits and hang-ups that get triggered from time to time, whether it's in the workplace or personal relationships or family of origin or current families. It's just going to happen where there's going to be triggers. And I think that our crisis of belief at that point is to decide how we're going to respond. Whether we pause, whether we jump right back into it, or whether we stop and think, what does this mean for my relational equity with this person? And am I being the best person that I can be? And just to be fully open, my therapist, and in California, we don't mind talking about that. It's kind of like going, get your dry cleaning, get your gallon of milk, and go see your therapist, then you swing back around and have dinner.
Yeah.
It's just one more chore, as we would have said in the Midwest. But, he says to me, he goes, are you the man? Are you acting like the man God wants you to be? The man that God created you to be? And then that's a time for this sober self-assessment. And sometimes we can't, or we struggle with being honest with ourselves. But the more we challenge ourselves to be brutally honest with ourselves, we're going to reap some great rewards.
Going back just a little bit, you talked about a misapplication of the word meekness or the word humble or humility. So how have you applied yourself in a developmental way, in a challenging yourself, in an accomplishing way, while wrestling with the tension of what humility means and how that is represented in your life? I don't know if I'm phrasing that very well.
No, you are. I think it's living through both the outcomes and the consequences, and it's also about the joy that I've experienced when I've been able to kind of release my need or my inclination to control. So the learning has come from outcomes. So if a relationship was struggling, and I kind of stood up with bravado and held my ground, so to speak, stoic, then it didn't improve. Actually, the relationship could deteriorate. Now, in my early years and climbing the ladder and not really caring so much about other people, that was just part of doing business. It was my errant, very, very wrong way of thinking. But the more that I was allowing God to transform me, the more sensitivity that I grew to have for other people's feelings. And it genuinely mattered. It wasn't mattering to whether I could get the deal cut or whether they would fall in line as a direct report, but that there was a genuine care and love for the team. So that moved me. That transitioned me into the more humble role because it felt better in my heart, and it was better with the relationships, and it had the other person being validated and feeling good.
So on the one hand, there was a release of the outcomes
Yeah.
and an amplification of the relationship.
Yes. Yeah.
Amazing. Love it.
Yeah.
So the second component of what we're talking about in the H3 leader is this idea of being healthy. And the first place anyone wants to go in that conversation is to our physical health.
Right.
And that's fine. I understand that.
Yeah.
But I really want to make sure that we're appreciating the broader spectrum of health that matters in our interplay with society, with people, with coworkers, with the people that are in our sphere of influence.
Right.
It's so much more than just looking fit or being able to run a mile or whatever.
Or a marathon like you.
Yeah.
Right.
So I'm curious as to what you think from your perspective on how important health is across that spectrum of the heart, soul, mind, and strength in your development over the years.
Yeah, I mean it progresses year by year. I think the discoveries grow day after day. It's not a static or a stagnant I've arrived kind of thing. Because to go to your point, I guess we can go to the body first. Now that I'm 65 years old and still in denial about it, except the Medicare card that arrived a couple weeks ago.
Looking great, though.
Thank you. And so, with all those things in mind, there's just some things about the aging process that you can do everything right, but you're still going to age at some rate. And so there's a reality check, I think, in that process. But I think then there's motivators that come behind why I want to be healthy. At first, I preferred fried pork rinds and French fries and onion rings. I'm not saying that's bad to anybody in the tribe who is rebuking me right now because I still love it. But I have had some wake-up calls. If I may digress just a moment, my wife brought me home some new T-shirts a few weeks ago. And in the back of the neck, it said double XL. And I tried on one of them downstairs where she was, and I was really put out. I tried it on, but I can't, and I really believe this, is that it was too tight, and I blame the manufacturer.
Yeah. They're changing the sizes on us.
That's exact, and honestly, I believed it. I said, I can't believe that that Nordstrom would handle a product that was so inconsistent, and a manufacturer that was so.
Bring back USA manufacturing with real sizing.
There wasn't, it just wasn't congruent with their brand nor what I thought the brand of the product was. So I was incensed, and I said to Cindy, well, let's just pack this all up and take it back tomorrow. I obviously want a full refund and an explanation. And what an explanation on why this was so awry. And so I marched upstairs with the shirts, and I was even going to repack some that I bought a few weeks earlier that were even seemingly not fitting. And I tried it on upstairs in my private mirror and took a look at it, and it didn't seem to be a manufacturing issue at that point. It seemed to be an intake issue, and I had to come out of my denial, frankly, and say, is this the way you want the train to keep rolling? Not only because of, I have to say there's a bit of pride in there. I have to own it.
Yeah.
There's pride.
Yeah.
And there's also the fact that I want to be alive for my kids as they get older and my grandchildren. I really do want to say that. People always used to say that to me, and I go, yeah, okay. I grew up in the Midwest, and I'm not bagging on Midwesterners here, but the family of origin I came from didn't really hold back on if they liked it and it looked good, they just eat it.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's how I got my affinity for pork rinds. But needless to say, it's a new day.
Yeah.
And I like to swim, so I'm starting to swim and eat better. I've had a significant weight loss, and gosh, new shirts, new jackets, I didn't go out and buy.
That's awesome.
It's wonderful. And so I'm clear
Congratulations.
thinking and everything. Thank you. So I'd like to just pivot for a second on something that's really, two things that are really near and dear to me. And I've heard it said, and I believe it with all my being, is that there is really no health without mental health. Because everything is so tied to our brains and the functions of our body and our minds that intersect what you just talked about, the mind also, that if our mental health isn't on point, either because of how we're eating or our DNA or life traumas that we've been through or a disease that we may have, that life is really hard. And I can speak to that. And I've dealt with my own issues in that arena, and I deal with them every day. But I think that clinging to the fact that stigma is being broken on mental health issues day by day, and I think our willingness to come out of denial and to take care of ourselves with professional people and spiritual wisdom and people praying for you and caring for you, that there is light at the end of the tunnel, no matter how dark it gets. But we have to do it in community. We cannot, no matter how good our mind is or our physical health, we're not created to do it alone. And so I think that navigates then into the heart aspect of my experience as my heart started to shrivel when I started to be more of a recluse. And that really started during COVID, like I think for so many of us, where we just kind of withdrew. I may have withdrawn to be feeling safe or to shut out the world or whatever it may have been. But it started to roll with me behaviorally. And I got sad and I got more depressed than usual. And the mental health was not good. And then that translated right into the heart condition. And then that waded into the spiritual aspect, which you also spoke about. As a Christian, I believe that there are aspects to our lives, some of the elements we can see and some of them we can't. Maybe they haven't happened yet, but they're in motion. Maybe they have happened, but they're still rolling in terms of our pain, our recollections, triggers we have over words, songs, relationships, things that are lost, things that are not found. And that's a real unsettling aspect based on where your spirituality lies. Now, I don't know what each of your tribe members believes or if they believe anything or not. But I do know that we are all looking for some kind of purpose. Why on earth we're here. At the end of the day, in some small way, in fleeting moments or whatever, why am I here? And I think that seeds us into the spiritual aspect of health as well.
Yeah, I love that you went there. A couple of just reflections on what you said, so thank you for that. Yeah. In the H3 Leader ecosystem, I've got a foundations course, and the first thing that we talk about is the one existential truth, and that is that every single one of us on this earth is in search of meaning.
Yeah.
And so from a leader perspective, it's how do we facilitate someone's search for meaning? And we can do that in the workplace. We can do that in our neighborhoods, in our communities, in our families, etc. So I appreciate that perspective very much. Another thing, what you just said, that it really kind of it gave me pause initially, but as you unpacked it, I'm like, that's so true. So because of the acute nature of physical pain, Like if you've got a really bad toothache, nothing else matters.
Right.
It's
a focal point
everything gets filtered through the toothache now.
Right.
Right. Or
Yes.
I broke my ankle, or I pulled my calf, or
Yeah.
I've got a migraine. These physical pains, they're so acute, they're
Yes.
so immediate,
Mhm.
they impact our lives in the now.
Right.
So I've kind of filtered the physical health side of things. Of I really got to get that in order, and then the other three things I can explore more freely. But I think what you're keying into is that it's not just about the acute.
Right.
That there is this deeper seed of need for health in the more chronic areas of our lives, and I don't want to misuse those terms, but just trying to be kind of juxtaposed to acute. But these longer term development needs of our mental development and our emotional development and our spiritual development that doesn't happen in a 20-minute session. Right. This is a long-term health development thing. And oftentimes the degradation of that health is not immediate either. And if I were just to use a very rudimentary hand scale, right?
Yeah.
This is where I was healthy at one point in time. And for the first couple of years of that decline in health, I can hide it.
Yeah.
I can hide it from myself. I can certainly hide it from everybody else. I can be in that denial.
Yes.
And through humility, through being in the right conversations, you talked about therapy and other things that we can be honest with ourselves and maybe do a better job of staying in the healthy zone longer.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. The longer we can stay in that best window, or we might say from a professional standpoint, in the best practice aspect. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not just fending off decay.
No.
There's also the development piece. Now, you and I are in the coaching world. We've neglected to talk about the fact that we are fellow chairs.
Right.
So you are a chairman of a Convene board, or more than one, two boards, right? In SoCal. And so our vocation is about the development of these areas, not just the holding off of the decay.
Right.
But we try to be intentional in that. And anything else on the health side of things that you might have something to...
I think the other one is just kind of what you said. It's being open to being rejuvenated, to being renewed. Kind of other words that would fit with your narrative.
Yeah.
Yeah. So being willing to be willing is step one, and then taking the baby steps, as they say. Yeah. Looking forward, not back.
Yeah. Thank you. I really appreciate that insight, because again, I'm on a bit of a physical journey while on the other journeys as well, and I tend to lean that way heavily, but that really opened up my mind a bit.
Great.
So this idea of holistic.
Yeah.
So you've had a varied career, including the old marketplace to ministry jump, and what about this idea of expanding your practical engagement with the world as a leader? Have you seen valuable? Have you seen as a challenge? It's kind of hard when I was coming up with the concept of the H3 leader.
Yeah.
And this word holistic just kept coming up and coming up. But then trying to explain it sometimes can be awkward. It just doesn't seem to flow.
Right.
Yeah, I get the first one's escaping me. I get humble.
Right.
I get healthy, but holistic. That seems a little odd. Could you speak into that a little bit?
I think when I think of holistic, I think it's a fairly complex word, and that may be kind of hard to unpack. I'm even unpacking it as I'm speaking right now, in terms of the best way to explain it from my standpoint. I think it's about embracing the life model is about holistic. I think our self-awareness takes us to maybe areas where we're either comfortable or maybe better developed than other areas, almost like the physical side. But it's about I think it's about as we grow in understanding and learning and asking questions and receiving consequences. Uh, there's kind of a bigger reach around how things intersect. I think when I think of holistic, I think of something that's kind of woven together or blended. A lot of times you say holistic, people think about a supplement, a vitamin supplement, something in the health and beauty aisle,
Yeah.
or
Outside of the mainstream medicine.
yeah, an approach to healing
Yeah.
that is outside of big pharma and mainstream medicine. I think it's about, for me, the integration of the body, mind, soul, spirit, and it's about listening to those around me and also circumstantially about how to engage the things I've learned, the people I've met, and the places I've seen. To me, that's kind of braiding together my life experience, maybe some wisdom that I've garnered, and I think the passion to pass it on. It's kind of like when people say a life well lived. What a lot of people want to say when they get to their final breath here is that they say, I want to live and think that I've had a life well lived. And a lot of times, if you've been in a memorial service, a eulogy will include this person lived a life that was well lived. Their life was well lived. And so what does that mean? I think it means something to do with this holistic. They weren't a compartmentalized individual. They weren't linear only in their considerations and their thoughts and their judgments. They were more holistic. It was more well-rounded as opposed to linear.
I love that you're going there because it does tap into like a subtext of why I even chose that word.
Yeah.
And that's why we talk about it's not just about physical health. I mean, it's heart, soul, mind, and strength. And I go back to the greatest command. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. And the reason I believe that those are there is because in the original, I'm not going to pretend that I can project their mindset, but my interpretation of that is the entire self.
Right.
Love the Lord your
Yes.
God with all that you are.
Yes.
In a holistic manner. So
Yeah.
those four categories are put some boundaries, some
Right.
perspective to the conversation anyway.
Right.
So I love that you took it there. And then I also think, as I've learned about your life, one of the reasons that our first conversation went 3 hours is because we talked about the concerts that you went to in college.
Yes.
And
Yes.
you're like, did you know that?
That'd be a separate podcast. I think you'd all find it very entertaining, but that's another day.
But when I think of this punk kid that grew up in Pekin, Illinois, and we won't talk about the fact that they weren't the Dragons then.
No, we won't go there anymore. They were committed to the Chinese culture of the brand. That's all I'm going to say.
That's right. And then went to Illinois State University and rocked out to AC/DC and all these others.
Oh, so fun.
And then married some California girl and decided to take a journey over to Colorado. And now you're a California boy and you're out surfing and all this stuff.
Yeah.
But then get into ConAgra, like that's like a mega brand.
Yes.
It's huge. I mean,
Yeah.
you said what? 60?
Fortune
60?
Yeah, has been, yeah.
Incredibly huge.
Yeah.
And then pop over just to a little church called Saddleback,
Yeah.
and do some work there, and then
Fighting it every step of the way. I mean, I was gritting my teeth going in there. I did not want to go in the door.
And then all of that, and I don't want to pretend that I follow anything close to a similar track, but when I was introduced to Convene, I was like, God, did you just orchestrate all of that so that I could do this?
It's wild.
Yeah. And that idea of bringing the wholeness of your life experience into pouring into our members and their teams and their industries and their hearts and their families it's just such a beautiful thing.
Thank you.
And I want to thank you for that, for one, but you took the conversation there when you unlocked that meaning of holistic. So
thanks.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Appreciate it very much.
Well, Ken, I just want to add one thing to your narrative there is the reason I went to ISU is because they had the best entertainment committee of any college I could find. That's the God's honest truth. I did not research.
It wasn't the academics. It wasn't the beautiful campus.
No.
It wasn't that it was close.
It wasn't the mascot of the Red Bird. It was honestly, they had the best entertainment committee, and it's a laugh, right?
Did you knock it out in 4 years?
Yeah.
Good for you.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
I crammed 4 years into 5 myself.
Okay. We're all on a different journey.
That's right. That's right. That's
And my
right.
parents made me knock it out in 4, or you're going to get knocked out. Yeah, so.
So one of the things I want to do is, as we kind of wrap it up here,
Yeah.
is get a feel for like the sage in you. Like you've lived a life. You've already dropped some beautiful nuggets of wisdom tonight. But if you had something to just kind of, man, these are 1 or 2 things that I've learned on my journey that I would love to just communicate to anybody that's willing to listen, particularly as we take on the mantle of leadership in the lives of the people that God has put in our sphere. What would be your message?
Okay. Well, my first message is when I hear the word sage, I think of Gandalf wandering around in the desert. So that's not this guy. But to answer your question about nuggets, I would encourage everyone who's listening today or watching today would be to really think carefully about being vulnerable enough with a person you can trust, a safe person, to be that person who is walking alongside of you in life and can both ask you hard questions and also tell you sober truth. Because without that, I would be wandering like Gandalf and tripping over myself. We all have blind spots, and we have this thing about how we see ourselves, how the world sees us, and then how we really are. And without that person walking alongside of you, holding you up and standing back to back with you, there's going to be some missteps, and you don't have to have them. So that's one nugget.
I love that because our society, the world, has taken the word safe space and I think just brutalized it. The spirit of what you're talking about is not, I'm not going to be, nobody's going to touch me.
Right.
It's I love you so much that you don't have to worry about my judgment.
Right. Exactly.
I'm not here to judge you. I'm not here to rake you over the coals. I don't see it as my job to fix you.
Right. Absolutely.
I'm your friend.
Yeah.
And I love you.
Yeah.
And I care about you, and I'm going to just allow God's Spirit to work in and through me to reflect whatever He wants to reflect. But no matter what you say or no matter what I say, tomorrow we're going to be fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
You know what's so cool about this, gang, is that as Ken is sitting across from me at this table and saying that, I believe those are his words for me as well as his example to you. So thank you, Ken.
You bet.
Yeah.
You bet.
Another nugget is resist the temptation to compare yourself with other people. 2 slippery slopes that can happen from that is, one, you start feeling bigger than you are, possibly, or as they used to say, believing in your own press clippings, which can be dangerous. And it's also can be about the fact that you feel sad because you're not somebody else. So if you can resist the temptation, or at least make a valiant effort and get better and better at that, you'll be happier professionally and personally and relationally. Because again, you were created to be exactly who you are. And you have gifts and skills and talents that no one has the exact kind of combination that you have when it comes to blending it in with your personality and your life experiences. There is no other, it's kind of like your fingerprint. There's no other one that's the same. Oh, they may have some experiences of yours, or went to the same college you went to, or went to the same high school, or maybe they didn't go to college, no big deal. But nobody has the same unique design of their life experiences, their education, their hurts, their habits, their hang-ups, and their gifts, because they're all enrobed together, actually as a holistic aspect of who you are.
Yeah, because by God's design, the world needs that.
Yes. It does.
And the world needs you to show up in that fullness.
Right.
I can't remember where I heard it along the way, but just as you're talking, it's coming back to my mind that the consequence of comparing yourself to others can only go one of two directions.
Yeah.
Either toward pride or toward shame.
Yeah. Right.
There's no usefulness in it.
Yeah.
If you compare and you're doing better, then it goes to pride. If
Right.
you compare and you're doing worse, it goes to shame. And
Yeah.
neither one of those serve you or humanity.
Right. Right.
So just avoid it altogether.
Yeah. There's one thing I learned also about when I was hiring people is in the beginning it was about like, if we want to build a strong organization, we want our people to be alike. we almost a cookie cutter. You know, there was a large computer firm, I won't name the name, where people wore the same kind of suits and ties and shirts, and they were magnificently successful. However, time changed, people changed, and let me share this with you. If you find yourself in an organization where you feel like people are looking at you like you have three heads, or that you speak in a different manner, or you think in a different way, it's probably because you've been placed there to provide the type of thinking diversity and experience that does not push against, but that it amazingly complements and strengthens the culture of that business. Now, if you are on the other side of it and you find yourself to be very aligned with most everybody else, it may feel very comfortable. But I would just say, continue to stretch yourself and reach for your level of discomfort. That would kind of be a nugget built into this.
And for those that are in positions of particular executive leadership, to foster that diversity.
Yes.
Don't force everybody to think the same, to get in line,
Right.
and we're not here.
Right.
Invite that diversity of thought into your conversations.
Yeah. I mean,
it's healthy.
I can remember times when, you know, I would walk around and see folks working and stuff, and I'd be thinking, I wonder why that person's not smiling. I wonder why they don't laugh more. I'm wondering why they do the things they do. And as I matured, thankfully, I realized because they're not made to be that way. They're different than you. Just because you're kind of jovial and a jokester and stuff like that, everybody doesn't have to be how you are to be okay. As a matter of fact, they're probably feeling better about themselves because they don't want to mask everything with humor. But so, yeah, be pliable, you know, on the people you surround you with.
Well, I don't want to get too far off on a tangent,
Yeah.
but we talked about something today, and I can't remember the book that was quoted, but I remember from another book called A Failure of Nerve. And the concept was the idea of being a non-anxious presence, particularly in your role as a leader.
Yeah.
And what that non-anxious presence allows, among other things, is the coexistence of diversity of thought without the abrasion, without this.
Right.
And you might invite that a little bit because that's what sharpens the edges. It knocks off the hard edges and then actually brings an eventual unity.
Yeah.
But that when you're anxious and you're not mature as a leader,
Right.
somebody raises their head and has a contrarian opinion, you just want to bop it down.
Right.
So I think that comes with that maturity and that non-anxious, and it just something that came up as you were talking.
Yeah.
So,
And no matter where you are in your journey, you may think you know exactly where you're going to be going next or where you're going to wind up. I kind of got news for you. It could be great news, it could be a little different news, but we really don't know. With our best laid plans, there's going to be several mid-course corrections. I say that with a word of encouragement.
yeah.
Because it's never over till it's over. If it's a downtime, I know this sounds Pollyanna, but it's just not over till it's over. Your pain and your travails will be used to galvanize you and equip you. Yeah, it's true story.
Amen. Amen. Anything else in your pile of nuggets there, Brett?
Well,
Before we close out,
I've got quite a pile, don't I? I think the other thing is do your best not to worry too much. I would say don't worry, but that would sound like, again, I have Pollyanna glasses and a realistic expectation.
And a little bit too much Bob Marley.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Either that or Hakuna Matata. And I just need to stay with the fact to just encourage you to get out a little box, little shoe box, cut a little hole in it. Every time you have a worry, write it on a little piece of paper, put it in the box. Every time that you can when you got that box with you. At the end of the month, open that little box and sort through the worries that you had and put them into two piles. The worries that came true, the things you were worried about, scared about, actually came true, and the pieces of paper about the worries that never manifest. And I think you're going to find this out for yourself, that the pile of what never really happened is going to far surpass in an exponential way the pile that you had of something that really happened that you're worried about. So all the best. I wish you great success in your journey in a holistic way.
There's so much truth to that, Brett. Just the amount of not only wasted energy, but contamination that happens through the process of worry. Yeah. It not only robs us of joy, it robs us of presence.
Yes.
But it robs us of the perspective on life that is one of abundance, one of provision, one of hope. I mean, we could go through the list of things that worry robs us of. Yeah. And it is an incessant thief.
Yes, it's unrelenting.
And that awareness of just, I mean, 90% of what we worry about doesn't even cross our threshold.
It doesn't.
So why are we worrying about it?
And we weren't. Here's the thing that's odd about it is that we weren't born to worry. When we were born, we could laugh and we could cry right from our first breath. I don't know about laughing, but not too far down the road, you're laughing, smiling. But we weren't born to worry. That was modeled to us somewhere, somehow. And frankly, it's all around us, so why wouldn't it have been modeled? But it's a learned thing. So let's all do our best to unlearn some of that.
We could go off on that, and I'm gonna curve away from it. But this idea of learned bad behavior as opposed to the natural behaviors that we were born with. Yeah. And again, we don't want to get Pollyannish. We don't want to be, just be a little baby. That's not the point. Right. But the majority of behaviors that we have that are negative and incessantly destructive were learned, which means they can be unlearned.
Yes, that's right.
Which can happen in community. You see all that's tying together?
Yeah, amazing how that works.
Absolutely love it.
Yeah.
Brett, I don't mean to do too abrupt a close, but I just want to thank you for our time tonight. It is a blessing to have you as a friend, and appreciate the conversation, and look forward to doing this maybe again some other time.
I look forward to it.
All right, blessings to you.
Thank you, Ken.
And of course, thank you for taking the time and energy to join us in today's conversation. I hope you'll continue to join us on this journey, a beautiful shared journey from here to there in the world of leader development. Until we meet again, remember to always do something, anything, every single day to move the proverbial ball forward, to make the world within and around you at least 1% better. Because whatever your goal, vision, or task, remember, every day is training day. Blessings to you all, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye for now.